All right, welcome back to the One of None podcast. This is episode 8. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Jonah Casella,
And I'm your other host, Dr. Andrew Ganung.
and today we're going to talk about not using your past and using it to play the victim as opposed to using it to your advantage. And I want to start this off by asking a question. Do you look at your upbringing as a negative? And do you see yourself as a victim of your past and because of your past? So I want you guys to think about that during this podcast and really ask yourself that question. Okay. So Andrew and I are going to be getting into a little bit about our past and our background today to kind of elaborate a little bit more on this topic. So I don't know if you want to start, Andrew, or you want me to start.
Yeah, um, before we kind of dive into the personal stuff, I think this is what our culture has gotten to severely as of the past couple years. We, I think it's always been there, but I think it's been more prevalent as of the past like decade. I would say our generation is notorious for this, is playing a victim mentality, and saying, "Well, I can't do this because I didn't have the resources growing up. I didn't grow up on the right side of town, so I never had what you had whenever you were growing up. I didn't have the parents you had whenever I was growing up to give me the knowledge and the teachings that you have." And I think all of these different phrases and mindsets boil down to one thing. And it's a harsh reality that and maybe a tough pill for some of us to swallow, that doesn't matter the circumstance you were provided, doesn't matter who raised you, who didn't raise you, and what environment you grew up in. All that matters is what you did or did not do. And ultimately, nobody really cares about your previous environment, no offense, but you look at all the like crazy successful people of the world, you don't see that stuff. You see what the successes they had. And then maybe after doing some digging, you find out that they didn't have the most growing up, or they didn't have the resources that you probably thought they did. And it's a really bad mentality because it limits what we talk about all the time, which is growth, the growth mindset. And I think probably each of the listeners out there has some type of scenario in their head that they can think of why maybe they aren't in the right place or they aren't where they want to be because of the past. And if that's you, you're not the only person. We all have them, um, to some more degree than others. But the biggest thing and takeaway from this is that you don't use that as a barrier moving forward, because it's a perpetual cycle. Then if you let it control you, and it's going to limit your ability to grow as both an individual and as a leader, or whatever it is that you want to do. So I think that's kind of the start for this. Is our culture is really bad at this, and our generation, me and Jonas specifically, is really bad at this, and it limits a lot of people. And I see it a lot in the workplace. I see it a lot, maybe not my own workplace, but previous workplaces, friend groups, and things like that. So, Jonah, I know I mentioned something in the beginning talking about growing up in the right side of town, or in an area that maybe doesn't have all the resources that you wish you probably would have had growing up. Do you want to talk a little bit about that in your upbringing and maybe what that was like? And I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, definitely. So don't get it twisted. I didn't grow up in a really super bad neighborhood or something like that. These are not super dramatic examples, but it's just our examples. So for me, like I've mentioned in earlier podcasts, my parents were divorced before I can remember that they were even together. I was so young. And that's a lot of people nowadays. So I know that a lot of people experience that and have been through that too. So my dad grew up in a really small country town, which is where I spent most of my childhood. And then my mom was kind of bouncing around in the suburbs of Pittsburgh area, in some not so bad places, in some kind of crappy places, doing the best that she could. So I had the unique experience, and I like to say I had the opportunity to see life through two different lenses growing up. two different perspectives, which I'm really thankful for. It At different points in my life, I used that as an excuse to be upset and to maybe act out when I was younger. And now that I'm a little bit older and I look back, I'm glad that I had those experiences and that I was able to, see life with two different lenses, essentially. So I'm not going to get too deep into what my parents did as careers and what how much money they made and all that stuff, but I will say that my dad was a little bit better off than my mom financially. My mom, just like my dad, both worked their asses off to provide for us and did the absolute best that they could. And I'm very thankful for that. But with my mom, because we moved around a lot, some areas were badder than other areas. And so it was a little bit more of a struggle. And I got to see life as a little bit more of a struggle financially with her, which was good to experience because it was motivating in a lot of ways where, we weren't living in poverty on the streets or anything, but I saw what life could be like if I knew that if I put in the work and had a good career, I could avoid some of the hardships that she had to go through. And so it was really motivating for me to see that growing up and good to experience. And it was not just me; it was my brother too that she was raising. And she went through a lot of stuff in her life, that we kind of experienced as being a part of it. So it was really good for us to see that, although at the time it was hard, of course. And then with my dad, my dad's upbringing wasn't the best. Same with him. Parents split up when he was younger. A lot of fighting in that relationship too, just like with my parents, between my parents growing up, and some issues with the divorce. And so he had to experience that as well. So he even had a hardship coming into it. And my parents had me when they were quite young. My dad was like, they were 23 when they had me. And my mom had already had my brother when she was 19. So, they had to grow up real fast. And then of course they split up, so that made it tough because now you're doing things not as a team. They didn't really get along for a long time, so then it was a battle. And experiencing that as a kid is it's tough when your parents don't really get along, and and are almost not making you pick sides but kind of trying to get you to pick sides. And I know that's something that a lot of people experience, and it's not just me. So I'm not playing a victim by saying that. I'm just giving you the lowdown on what my life was like for a little while there. And so because of the way my dad was brought up, he tried to be a better version of his dad and his parents, and he did the best he could, at the time being so young, having debt from school, trying to work a full-time job and basically raise me a lot of the time because I went to school in that school district, so I lived with him a lot of the year. And so, he did the best he could. He was definitely tough on me compared to my mom. He was the strict parent that really cracked down and made sure that my grades were in check, that I was on track in school. And at the time, him and I didn't have a really good relationship, and we didn't really get along because he had to be the strict parent. And of course, he probably could have handled it differently, but that's hindsight now. But he was a strict parent, so him and I didn't really get along. So our relationship really suffered whenever I was growing up. It wasn't until I was at the end of college going into grad school that we started to really develop a stronger relationship again. But I was mad at him for so long growing up and played the victim card that I had. Oh, I just had a tough parent. Like all my friends get to do this stuff and their parents don't harp on them and get after them for their grades. Like, why am I so unlucky to have this parent? And I played that victim card for a long time. Now looking back on it, I wouldn't be, and with both parents too, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for them and the way that he was, even though he was tough at times. So I'm really thankful that he was hard on me in those times because it shaped me. And going forward, I know, like, I experienced that and I can take that into my relationship and my future kids as well. So it's all a learning experience, and that's what you should take away from your past is instead of dwelling on the hard times and only thinking about that and maybe having some hatred or some emotions towards the people in your life that raised you or lack thereof, take it as that it made you stronger, that it gave you different perspectives that other people might not have had, and you learn from that, and then you get to move forward and be better than they were for the people that are in your life. So that's a little bit of my background. My mom was a little more relaxed. She was more of wanted to be the friend. She, like I said, she had a lot more going on, um, and wasn't in quite as good of a stable of a place herself. So she did the best she could. We were more of the friendly type. But that's a little bit of my background. I'm sure I'll think of some other stuff too as we go along. Andrew, I don't know if you want to jump in and give a little bit of yours now.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I like how you said opportunity. I had the opportunity of having parents, whatever you said, X, Y, or Z, and that's a good way of looking at it. And sometimes we don't come to that conclusion until later on in life. I know that we mature a
Mhm.
lot over time, and for us, and maybe it hit us closer to college and going into our respective schools after undergraduate. And I like how you put that because you're right. It is an opportunity. People look at it as a bad thing most times. So the fact that you can look at that now with that maturity and that mindset is important because obviously you've made a name for yourself in your space, and it definitely shows, and that you didn't let your past, you know, um, stop you from moving forward in your stuff in your endeavors in life. So I can dive a little bit into mine briefly. For most of you listening who are my friends, you probably already know this about me, but um, grew up in Pennsylvania, was born in Harrisburg, lived in an area called Camp Hill for 2 years. My mom had a she was diagnosed with a cancer 14 years prior to around 2001, and I'm sorry, 2000, yeah, 2001, and then she got re-diagnosed with the same cancer in '99, 2 years after I was born. So we moved to Pittsburgh for her treatment, ended up taking her life, and so we stayed in Pittsburgh. That was the normal, was just growing up with a pops. He was, I think I mentioned previously, he was pretty relaxed with our upbringing, probably because he was raising two different, kids, my sister and myself, and so trying to play both sides is a pretty tough thing. So I think he was a little bit more lax with that, and that's part of the reason why, I think. And then my dad remarried after a little bit of time to my current stepmom, who I'm very close with, and I have two stepsisters. So we grew up in a house that had two different families, so unique experience. Again, good opportunity for me to see another side of things. Definitely different when you have step parents. For those who are listening and have step parents, you know that the difficulty of that. You know, part of you doesn't want to listen to the step parent because they're not the real parent, and so it's like it's a fine line that they walk. But I was grateful to have a really great support system in my step family. So that wasn't incredibly limiting to me. In fact, she was a large part of my stepmom's a large part of why I'm in the medical field because she was a nurse growing up. So I was always surrounded by that, but also with the loss of my mom growing up, with that being in the kind of the back of my mind, I think I knew I wanted to go into medicine for that as well. And then whenever I was 13, flash forward a little bit, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is like a childhood cancer. I went through a year of that, the ups and downs of that, the image that you take on during that time, especially during the harsh treatments of chemotherapy, radiation, all that stuff, definitely throws you through a loop. You don't hear me talk about it a whole lot anymore because I don't really associate myself with that person as much. Not that I don't still know that it's a part of me and that it's part of my past, but I don't let it define my future. And that's a large reason why I don't talk about it. So a lot of people that are listening, you would have no idea because I don't post it anywhere. I don't talk about it. My close friends know because I share with them over the years, or they were with me going through it. But I kind of dissociate myself from that because I think if I kept that image as like the forefront of my mind, then I would let it control my whole entire persona, and that's not what I wanted. So, um, definitely interesting upbringing, not the classic. So, I think I have seen a lot of people in my circumstance who have had a childhood cancer or have lost a parent that have gone the opposite way, where they ended up kind of going down a slippery slope and they let that define them. And I understand it. I definitely see it. But it's thankfully something that I didn't have to deal with because for as long as I've known, my family kind of just went along with what my mindset was, which was I just didn't want it to be a part of me. Now, I talk about my mom all the time. Doesn't Jonah, you know this. I talk about her any time of the day. It doesn't affect me anymore. Like unless I really, really think about it, but I use it as leverage. Part of that is what I think, not to dive into faith, but what I think God wants, the man that God wants me to be and the man that my mom wanted me to be. I think I keep that in the forefront of my mind. And then also who my dad wants me to be. I want to be my dad in a lot of ways because he's a really noble individual, has a great wealth of knowledge, and I always just wanted to be him. And so growing up with only a single parent for a period of time and raising majority of our childhood as a single parent, it's a very difficult thing. And you learn a lot about someone when you get to observe how they do that. And there's nobody that I respect more than my dad in that regard. So he never let that, like, he never let himself be a victim of the circumstance either, which he had every possible right in the world to let that affect him in every way, shape, or form. In fact, he ended up digging his heels in and doubling down on what he was doing to the point where he actually created a very successful career, which he's still in. But he is doing very, very well. And he was doing very, very well even after the period of time after my mom passed later down in his career. And it was because he didn't let it affect him. And I think that's probably why my mindset is the way that it is now. And I mean, people have definitely brought up the fact before, like UPMC, which is a big hospital in Pittsburgh where I was treated at, has reached out to me saying, "Hey, we want you to speak on behalf of people or children with, who have undergone childhood cancer and treatment and all that, as you're like a positive voice." And whenever I was attending the University of Pittsburgh and I was going back to the hospitals for annual checkups, they knew that I was acquainted with UPMC and the University of Pittsburgh. So having gone to school there, they wanted me to talk about it as a voice for them. And I think I didn't see the other side until they really started to tell me there are a lot of kids that are struggling in your circumstance. And I guess I just didn't put it together that obviously like it hits us hard, but you kind of just go along with it. Like any other health battle, you go along with it, right? Like, I don't know. I didn't think much of it. So not long story short, not to create any type of pity for me because I don't. That's not what I'm trying to create here. I'm trying to create an understanding for you that despite the circumstances, you can always overcome what's been thrown at you. And with our current culture, we experience that a lot. There's a lot of people out there who don't like to move forward or they feel stuck in their tracks because of their experiences, whether it's of the same degree as me and Jonah or more, a higher degree or a lesser degree. And I think the most important thing is just understanding that, and I mean this with no disrespect at all, nobody cares about your past environment. I'm sorry, but nobody cares. And if you think for a second that people really are going to feel bad for you and that's going to be if that's what you're looking for and it's an outlet for you, you're going to strike out every time and you're going to have a very hard awakening because people will feel bad and they'll give you their sympathy, but they will not say anything else besides "I'm sorry," and that's all that you're going to be left with. So if that's what you're looking for, go ahead and get it, but it's not going to get you to where you want to because that is going to stop you in your tracks, and that's ultimately an excuse for lack of execution or lack of work ethic. So, John, I know I just talked for a while, but
No, that was all. That was great. And I have a couple things off of what you said too. One, like I know your dad. I've met him multiple times now, and I've thought about this before. And like for him to go through what he went through and stay. I mean, I'm sure he had his weak moments behind the scenes, but like not letting it affect his relationship with you guys and staying strong is just a testament to the person that he is. Because
yeah,
Mark's a great guy, and so is my dad. And for the longest time, like I said, I didn't necessarily look up to my dad because of our relationship, but always looked up to him for his work ethic, and that's something that will always have that he'll always have given me. Is he's a gritty guy. He gets the work done. It doesn't matter the circumstance. and I'll always have that from him, which I really appreciate. And yeah, honestly, it's and you made a good point in that there was something that kind of my dad always said, and even like that I got from my mom too, is that somebody always has it harder than you. Like my situation growing up felt hard, but like look at your situation and then look at other people's. There's always somebody that has it harder than you. And so if you have that mentality in your life that even on your worst days, not just with your past, but even like your present, even on your worst days, if you just think that, yeah, this sucks, this is a bad day, but like, man, my life is still good. Like somebody has it harder than me. And so it gives you just to keep things in perspective, keep things in check. That's something that I learned from my parents, and made it easier to keep going.
Yeah.
And I actually have a question for you, which I mean, you kind of already answered this, I guess, but I wrote this down before we even started, because, like you said, I mean, like you just said to everybody, like you lost your mom to cancer, you yourself had cancer. It wasn't the easiest upbringing. Your dad obviously did a good job, but how did you use that experience and what you went through to be better? And you know like how did you use that experience to make you better when it would have been easy for you to just to be a victim, to play the victim with a scenario like that, with what life dealt you?
That's a good question, and that's a loaded one. But to give you a short answer, that's a good question, Jonah. I think it's a couple of different things. I think part of it is um, what you take in. So what I would, the friend groups I surrounded myself with, the people I surrounded myself with, and chose to surround myself with throughout my upbringing, or even in college. I think you were a big person that influenced me a lot. Like I said previously, I wasn't really a super motivated individual besides just like working out growing up. So the studious Andrew that a lot of people know me as, and you know me as, was not that way growing up in high school. So part of it was just like I didn't want it to affect my life moving forward. I didn't want it to define me because I think I just hated the idea of like having cancer. It was almost like a weakness in my mind. Now, every single time I say that, people are like, "Come on, Andrew, it's not a weakness." You're right, it's not. But that's the way I framed it in my mind. And in order for me to not be a weak individual, I dissociated myself with that person. It doesn't mean I forgot about it. People who know me, I talk about it freely and openly about it, and it's part of me. But I didn't let it define me because I didn't want it to make me different than others. And I think that was more of like a self-awareness thing. So maybe I was actually a little bit more like I was a little bit too self-conscious about myself to the point where it put me in a spot where I didn't want people to even know that I had that. So that's why I never talked about it. Because the person, if you saw me at 13, who was a little bald headed dude who had no eyebrows or anything like that, was loaded up on steroid medication and was super, they juice you up with a bunch of medications to help you counteract the weight that you lost, at least in my case, and the weight that you'll lose during chemotherapy. I basically just hated that idea and the person that I look like in that. So I always was like, I don't want to be that person. So I was like, people don't know I have cancer. People don't know it. I don't want people to know in the future. So when you look at me, probably most people would say I never knew that. Second off it was the people I surrounded myself with in college. So it was like it was Sean, it was Tashi, it was all those people that really pushed me to be better to the point where like all I really focused on was going forward. I didn't think even like remotely about the past at all. It was just like, all right, I got the next goal. I got the next goal. I got the next goal. And really it was a competition because I was trying to keep up with you, with all of y'all, really. So that was a big part of it too. And then with regard to my mom, I know I just talked about mostly about my cancer growing up, but with my mom, I think it was I was lucky enough to have a stepmom that played a really strong role in my life. But even then, I think I did used to kind of feel bad for myself about my mom because it was like a way for me to like I don't know. I think I did used to feel that way, and then once I grew and matured a little bit, I took that on as like this is more fuel to the fire. I gotta just keep getting after it because I know that's what she wants me to do. And when you have that in the back of your mind, you don't really let it affect your future. And so it was, I don't know, it's a unique mindset, and I don't
Yeah.
want to say that it's a mindset that you can only have if you go through it, but part of that is it. You learn a lot from that. But for those who are struggling with the victim mentality, who aren't even remotely close to any type of circumstance that Jonah and I talked about, maybe you had the best upbringing in the world and you're struggling with moving forward. There's a way out of it. You don't have to go through what we went through or what anyone else goes through just to be able to move forward. So that's a really good question, Jonah. And I don't know if I answered it the best that I could
No,
have
you did. You did
on
a
the
good job.
spot.
And the reason that I asked you that is because, I know your story, obviously. Like, I know everything. And I've known it since I met you after a time. I think you didn't, it's not the first thing you said whenever we met. Obviously, it was later down the line. Like, I never knew that was the case. I feel like whenever I found out that you had cancer before was because I saw your port
Mm-hmm.
insert. And I asked you about it, and then that's probably what prompted it. I know you wouldn't probably have just come out and told me because you don't care about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason I asked you that too is because your story is unique, and it makes sense if you know who you are because you're so dedicated to your health that I think knowing your past that had such a huge impact on like why you're so in tune with your health, and not just at the gym but just eating healthier and just trying to maintain your health because you knew what it was like to not have it,
Yeah.
and you saw what it was like to lose somebody because of the health situation. So I know that had a huge impact on how it shaped you. But it's great that you, of course, when you're younger, you're gonna mourn and feel bad and everything. But now that you've moved on in a way mentally that has allowed you to grow instead of to hold you back, and that's great. And that's what I hope everybody can take from this is that no matter what situation you're in or what cards you were dealt, yeah, in the moment things will be tough, but hopefully, eventually you'll be able to use it as fuel to grow and get better instead of hold you back, because that's what's important. um and I have that was kind of the main points, other than just not being a victim of your upbringing, of your past, and not letting the people that raised you, or the people that should have raised you but didn't raise you right, as an excuse to be lazy. Take away the positives in the hard times and use it as fuel to be better each day,
Yeah.
because that's really all that matters. Like Andrew said, nobody cares about your past. It's all about what you're doing now to get better, and what the future holds for you.
Yeah. I want to make sure that I feel kind of guilty now. 'Cause I felt like I just talked a lot about, I don't want to come off as like I'm a superior human because I was able to come out of that circumstance on top, and I'm nowhere near the top now. But to kind of elaborate and maybe hopefully resonate with the people that are listening, maybe some questions for you are, maybe you're in a circumstance where you had a similar situation, or you're in a circumstance where you didn't grow up with all the resources that you wanted, or you didn't have the best mentors growing up, or the right parents that you feel were there to guide you, or you went and you grew up with great parents in a huge house and you had all the things that you ever wanted, and you still feel like you're stuck in your tracks and you can't seem to get out of that. Oh, well, my parents had everything, but they never really helped me with anything growing up. Like they would pay for all my stuff, but I never really was taught what hard work ethic was. Okay, then so what do you think about what you need moving forward? What's going to help you take the next step? Because ultimately it's going to fall on you. If you're trying to search for the answer, it starts with you. That's the very first thing. I think you're in control of your circumstances in every single scenario possible. And if you think you're not, you're wrong. You are, because how you handle scenarios that aren't fair to you is part of you. Even though you're given a bad hand, you can still respond well to those things. And I think a true test of your character is when you have absolutely nothing at all left. How do you show up in that scenario? Think about your lowest time in your life, where you feel like you're at your lowest point. No one's there to help you. You have no support system. You don't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You don't have a significant other that's there to help pick you up. Your parents are not in your life as much as you wish they were. You're struggling in your bank account. You can't figure out what's going on. How do you respond in that circumstance? That's a true test of your character. And if you're listening to this and your first thought is, well, I'm going to dwell and think about all the things that are going wrong in my life, that's your start, is your mindset. You have to start there, and you have to start talking to yourself differently. Because if you continue to have these conversations in your head, you're going to go nowhere, and you're going to spin your wheels and stay exactly where you're at. And I'm not trying to come off as hard, but it starts with your mindset and how you talk to yourself. Because if you stack like a lot of small great decisions alongside each other, you can start to build yourself out of the trenches or pull your feet out of the mud. And it starts with being better at what you're doing and what your current role is. A lot of the people listening to this, you probably have a cell phone. You probably don't have to pay for it yourself, and if you do have to pay for it, you're able to pay for it without struggling enough. And you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. So you're already at a start there. You have some flow of income. All right. So then get better at your job. Get better at what you're doing. Be the best at what you're doing. And then start doubling down and saying, how can I leverage myself even more with what I'm really good at and get really freaking good at whatever you're doing. And then continue to build yourself out of that. And I don't want to leave you with this conversation with just a pity story of myself or just an experience that I gave you about how my upbringing was, or Jonah telling you about how his upbringing was. I want to leave you with something that hopefully can help you get out of the mud. I don't, it's one thing to hear it and be motivated, but motivation only lasts so long. It's going to fall on discipline. That's what's going to help you last over time. And that comes down to habits. So, leverage yourself and your abilities and what you're good at. Maybe you're really good at communicating with people. Start doubling down on that. Figure out a way that you can hop into a field that allows you to really communicate with people and leverage those skill sets, and then get really freaking good at it and learn from the people above you. Because at work, you're probably going to have someone that's above you. You're going to have a boss that can help teach you, and then leave it up to yourself to continue to grow, because that's the only way you're going to continue to do it. And that's what hopefully this podcast is doing, is giving you some type of stepping stone to help you get out of that. And that's what's going to start with, is a mindset, how you talk to yourself. And then if you continue to have these bad thoughts in your head and these poor conversations with yourself, you're going to stay exactly where you're at. And that's not what we're trying to get at. And I know I talked over a little bit, but I wanted to definitely leave them with something that was useful and fruitful that they could take from it.
No,
And
that's
Jonah's
great.
exactly right. Jonah's exactly right. Someone has it worse than you, 100%. Like, there's so many people who have it worse than you in every circumstance of your life. There are people who are getting less sleep than you. There are people who have less money than you. There are people who live in less nice apartment or house than you, who maybe they don't even have parents. Find a way to dig yourself out of that, and it's going to come down to the conversations you have with yourself.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can, if you can start developing really good conversations with yourself, you can surround yourself with people who are like-minded, who also have similar conversations with themselves like that. And that's what it is. It's compounding interest over time.
Yeah.
Jonah
And
saved me in college. Jonah saved me 100% in college. I didn't care. And it was through people like Jonah and surrounding yourself with a small circle, which is second episode, if you want to go listen to it. It's the people like him that can help you get out of that. And it takes one person or it takes two people. But if you just let these people influence you, then you can really bring yourself out of a tough spot. And I definitely feel for the people out there who are struggling with that. And I mean at the bottom of my heart, I really do. And Jonah does too. We've been there. We've been in tough environments in our life, but look, the other side is a lot better. I'll tell you that
yeah,
much. Sitting in the same spot you've been in for years.
and take it, all those experiences as an opportunity to learn and grow. And there's nothing that, there's no dark time or bad experience that you can't get out of, or that you can't grow from and move on from. So yeah, don't play the victim.
It's a
Yeah, that's all I have.
dangerous game. Yeah, and last thing I'll say is there's a lot of resources on social media. This is the best time to win right now. I've heard a lot of people say that if you can just be consistent, I said this previously, if you can be consistent with what you're doing and you just get really good at what you're doing, you're going to outperform everyone, because no one can stay consistent nowadays. And so
Yeah,
that's all it really takes to get out of that mindset too, is just consistency with your mindset, with your talks with yourself, with the conversations you have with people. Maybe it's the people that are bringing you down too. And that's what we talk about with small circles. Find a circle that's going to help benefit you and pull you out of that.
yeah, it's
But it
definitely
ultimately,
necessary, because motivation is temporary, discipline is forever.
yeah. Yeah. So that's it. That's all we got for y'all. Hopefully, you can take something from this. If you're out there and you're really struggling, we definitely resonate with you. But reach out to us; we can help you through that. We're not going to be the best. I don't handle all the circumstances best, but I have some previous experiences that I've
Yeah.
been able to learn from and use as leverage to help me get to a higher ground. So, and Jonah does too. So reach out to us. Thank you all for listening. We're very grateful. We're going to keep releasing these episodes as time goes on in these coming weeks too. So be on the lookout for us. Keep following us on all the socials. We're super grateful for everyone listening. Keep sharing our stuff. And thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And if you ever need anybody to talk to, like you said, we're always here. One of None Nation on Discord. We're very active in that. So join, be a part of the movement and getting better, and be one of none. We'll see you next time.